Well, on behalf of the St. Hazlet School Board, I would like to welcome Dr. Dean Pratt to our district. Dr. Pratt is currently the Director of Building Administration and Instruction in the Howell Public Schools. I'd like to take a few minutes to describe the format again for people that are new here. The interview will take up to approximately 90 minutes. At the end of our questions, the candidate will have an opportunity to make a personal statement and ask the board any questions that Dr. Pratt may have. The interview is being taped on Channel 25 and will be aired this weekend. And check the TV station for the times. Because of the time allotments, questions are not going to be accepted at this time from the audience. However, we do seek your input from the staff and the administration. And there is a form on the side table that we'd like you to use, and would you turn that in to Cheryl? If you watch on if you want access, there is an assessment form on our website. If you go to hazlet.k12.mi.us and click on the superintendent search, and then click on the candidate feedback form, you can provide that assessment. It will directly go to Cheryl. Remember that we need your signature. This is a part of the public record and to be used by the board. Also, let me remind anybody filling out evaluations that it is the board's legal responsibility to select for the next superintendent. We are not asking you for a hiring decision at this time. We just want you to provide your input onto the strengths and any concerns you have for the candidate. And the characteristics we're looking for are on the form. I get to start the questioning tonight, Dr. Pratt, and while the board has had a chance to look at your Vita and the materials you sent to us, our audience has not. Would you take a few minutes and briefly review your educational background and your employment history so people can become familiar with what you've done?
Okay, and briefly, right. I graduated from Michigan State University with a bachelor's degree in elementary education. My first job was in South Dakota. I started at the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation just outside of Wounded Knee and taught 5th grade for half a year and then 7th and 8th grade science and reading. Moved from there, well actually that's where I met my wife, and we married at that time and moved to Montana, at which time I was a 1st through 4th grade teacher for 5 years in a 2-room schoolhouse, and basically that's where I learned my trade. That's very hard to do. From there, I became principal of Culbertson Middle School and or Culbertson Junior High and Culbertson Elementary School. I moved from there as elementary principal in Havre, Montana, at Lincoln McKinley Elementary School, at which time I was transferred for what was to be only a 3-week time period because our middle school principal in Havre quit and took a job in Helena, and I was the only administrator that had middle school experience, so I was supposed to fill the void until someone could be found, and 6 years later I finished. That was at Havre Middle School. It was in the meantime I picked up a master's degree at University of Montana in educational administration and wanted to get a PhD back at Michigan State University, and we moved back to Michigan. Took a job at Linden Community Schools as a middle school principal, Mason 3 years later as a middle school principal, and then I was contacted by Howell Public Schools to become, at that time, Director of Elementary Curriculum and Instruction. And since that time, my job titles changed 2 or 3 times. Right now, I'm Director of Building Administration and Instruction, and that's to change to an Assistant Superintendency in July. It's not new responsibilities, it's just the title change. And I received my doctorate last year from Michigan State University, and that's me in a nutshell.
Dr. Pratt, I'll ask the second question. Hazlet prides itself in being a progressive district. Tell us about how you have worked with others to develop new or creative ideas to advance learning opportunities for children.
I think I can come up with several examples. I'm going to use the most recent, especially in Michigan. In the area of being progressive, I think I take great pride in being able to move from the middle school level into, when I moved to Howell, Director of Elementary Curriculum. And at that time, we were very involved in early literacy. And the early literacy piece was new to me. In fact, I remember in the interview saying, when I was asked what I knew about it, I said, I think it's that New Zealand stuff. And since that time, we've moved quite a ways. We were able to, together, I was a co-writer on a grant for the SAP LAP grant that came out of MDE. We wrote it and was granted $1.5 million over a 3-year time period. Unfortunately, the state only gave us $870,000. But in the meantime, all of our K through 3 teachers have been trained in and certified in MLPP. They all know how to use the DRA, using MLPP and DRA in order to guide those assessments, in order to guide instruction. We've moved forward in pilot programs, again at the elementary level in 3 through 5 with MLPP literacy, and then have moved now into the middle schools with a pilot program this year, and then it's going to be expanded through 6 through 8 next year. Along with that, we instituted peer coaching and reduced classroom size, but I hate to say that that's not going to be the case next year. So that would be an example.
Great.
Can you give us some examples in which you've had several things that needed to be done at the same time and are of equal importance, and how did you handle that?
Well, right now, one of my other responsibilities is director of all state and federal programs. So we're closing up our consolidated grants with our at-risk instruction 31A and all the title programs. At the same time, we have to do our new consolidated grant. I'm also in charge of all hiring and recruiting for certified staff, so I have 43 people to hire. And as you may or may not know about Howell, we're building a new building about every 18 months. So what I did was take half a day off today. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes.
But to prioritize all those pieces, I pretty much line my week out and set the meetings that need to be set and the priorities that need to be completed by each and every day or by each week. And our superintendent helps us quite a bit on that, because we meet every Monday and say what we're going to accomplish, and then we write every Friday what we did and what the new priorities are for the following week. So I think that's each day is an adventure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Pratt, can you give us some examples of how your work experiences have qualified you for this position in Hazlitt?
Yes, I can. For several years now, I've had colleagues ask me, why don't you apply for a superintendency? And my answer has always been because I'm not ready, I'm not there yet, I'm not trained enough, I'm not smart enough. But this spring, I started deciding, yes, I can do this. As I go through my background, there's not a coach or not a sport that I think I haven't coached. That doesn't mean I was qualified to. Just happened to be the guy that got stuck with it. Drove a bus. There was a couple of years at a school district that I was the first guy online as the principal to get the boilers going and reset them. But those are just the basic day-to-day running of the business. I've taught every grade, 1st through 8th grade. I have quite an extensive experience in middle school and high school. The last 3.5 years, I've had the great opportunity of working with an administrative team in Howell. Our superintendent involves us in all things. And that means that I've been quite involved with budget development, been quite involved with negotiations, My doctorate degree is in K through 12 administration, but my cognate came from the School of Labor and Industrial Relations, so I feel very, very confident and comfortable there. I really think at this time that I bring quite a well-rounded background K through 12.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Pratt, it was a nice segue there when you mentioned budget development, because as you're probably well aware, in Michigan, everybody's talking budget, and now is the season. In the development of a budget, what do you see as the major goals and objectives that you would be establishing under this climate that we have in Michigan?
Under right now, which is the opposite of developing.
Yes, right. I mean, I understand, depending on your definition of the word development.
Right. Well, the budget piece. The budget piece is a piece that is quite frightening at times. There was a standard rule. I've worked for great superintendents, and all of them used to say the only thing you have to know about budget is don't spend what you don't have. That's number one. But the priority piece, in our case, we're facing about a $3 million shortfall for next year, and we're also a district that's growing quite a bit. 7 weeks ago, we had 32 students just in 1 week, and this new students are basically keeping us afloat. Since that time, though, what we've done in the part of developing the budget, knowing full well that there was going to be a $3 million shortfall, all central office administrators were brought in, and this is how I'd approach it too, and asked directly in your areas to set up your priorities, and then from those priorities, please come forward with what you would go from the top to the bottom. We weren't even asking for, or wasn't asking for cuts at that time. From that point on, we then brought in all the people that work with us within the varying departments, shared those, and then they came forward with all of their recommendations. We then brought all of the administrative team, which is our ad staff, and then all the leaders of all 5 bargaining units and the unions, and sat in one room and listed them all out. Once we had the priorities set, we drew the line across the bottom where $3 million was. Now, that wasn't enough. When the $3 million were identified, there were obviously some hot spots in there. Those were communicated to the board, and then in a board work session, the board sent us back to the drawing board on areas that they thought that we'd missed the boat on the priority pieces, and then we repeated the process. I think what's key in that, that I would carry forward is open communication, no secrets, and everybody taking part. At the same time, our superintendent also knows that he has to make the final decision on several of the, emotional cuts when it comes to that point, whether it be elementary, middle school, high school, whether it be not instructional programs or outside the instructional programs. But a key piece would be, so I feel like I'm starting to ramble, but a key piece is student programs, number one, and everything else followed afterwards.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
During a period of declining revenue, which I don't know if you say you're growing that fast, I don't know if declining revenue is what you're in, because it sounds like you have a shortfall, but nevertheless you're growing.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain how you would determine those priorities? Is that how you would do it, is list them out and draw a line? Is that the example?
Well, I didn't want to simplify it to that point. If it sounded like that, that took 4 to 5 weeks, and we had hints that this was going to occur as early as last Christmas. And unfortunately, we're getting used to not counting on hearing, we'd love to get the 6,700 once, The priority piece, even though we came out with the bottom priority pieces, that was in regard to the thoughts of 35 people. Once other people get involved and the discussions start occurring, those priorities can change, because we simply sometimes as administrators miss the boat on what was really a priority in regard to the board, or what was really a priority in regard to the community.
Pratt, you had mentioned educationally you have some background in labor and industrial relations. How does that translate to your philosophy and experience with the collective bargaining agreements with your various members?
My experiences in collective bargaining, although I've never led a collective bargaining group or a collective bargaining team, I've been part of collective bargaining teams back in Montana with collective bargaining with teachers. In Linden, same thing, collective bargaining with teachers. In Mason, I was on the collective bargaining team with teachers and also with Teamsters. And now in Howell, I'm on the collective bargaining team with teachers. And AFSCME, it's the support group. I've been part of two different types. I received the training in collective gaining when I was in Linden. And I have to say that I enjoyed that more than collective bargaining. But in the collective bargaining pieces, I feel comfortable. We are sent in with priorities from the board, and we have a fairly good working relationship with our unions. We know what monies are available, and we know what resources are available, and then also try to get very creative in being able to apply those resources where they need be in regard to what each group finds as a priority. I don't know if I answered your question or not, but
Oh, actually, I'm intrigued, your collective gaining.
the collective gaining piece?
Yes, thank you.
Dr. Pratt, as superintendent, what do you see as your role in promoting student achievement? And what efforts have you made to ensure this is a reality in your school district?
I would see that as the key, the key piece. The superintendent speaks to. I mean, what schools exist for one reason, and that's to educate children. When I was a teacher, I was convinced I was a pretty good teacher. When I was a principal, I was convinced I was still a pretty good teacher. I'm fairly sure I'm a better teacher than what I do as an administrator right now, too, but I've never lost the vision of maintaining and making sure that student achievement is number one. I think as a superintendent, I would be more involved because of my curriculum background and building principal experience to be more invested in assessment that drives instruction, not necessarily assessment that continually gives a mark in time. I'm going to give two examples. I mentioned MLPP training for early literacy instruction. Basically, those are just a simple various areas of assessment. And once the assessment is made, the teacher knows then where they can move in order to accelerate instruction to meet the final gain. Whereas the MEP test is giving me a snapshot in time on content area. In regard to where I work in Howell right now, we don't have a problem based on MEP or on our assessments that drive instruction in the area of reading and literacy. Our problem revolves around the attainment of content in social studies and science, and I don't know as we're unique in as a school district in Michigan. Well, one of the main reasons we're so focused is the superintendent I work for right now, because he's focused. And because of that focus and that drive, we're all focused. And we know that that we're held accountable for student achievement, and that's why we exist in our buildings. And that's, I think that's a role that I would want to emulate.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Pratt, this is we're going to a little bit about technology and use of technology to enhance student instruction. Can you give some examples of appropriate roles or the potential opportunities for technology to enhance student instruction?
Mm-hmm. What comes to mind is what we have in use right now. Again, because we're a growing district, we've had the ability to use bonds for technology. And we also have, I think, a fairly stellar technology department. The technology director reports directly to the director of curriculum, so they're tied together. We view technology as a tool, certainly, in order to gain achievement, academic achievement. So what we're looking at, and for direct student instruction, we use smart boards. I don't know if you're, the smart boards are the boards that you project from your computer, and the students can just simply speak and or touch and carry on. We use that a lot in our elementary levels. We've developed, through the curriculum department, back on the assessment question, areas that are called mini-MEEPs, snapshots of assessment, again, to drive instruction for the MEEP, and those are given anywhere from 5 to 8 times during the year, and students take those tests through the projection, and they hold handheld, like TV remote control. So boys do better than girls. That's a joke. But yes or no, and then not only do you do the answer, but immediately after the answer, it says how many in the room had it, how many didn't do it, and we'll give you a classroom schematic on what areas that teacher's going to have to focus on in the following week. We use technology a lot for survey work and for testing not only what teachers or bargaining units want to know, but community ideas. We use SPSS in order to crunch the data for predictive values. I think the Palm technology is extremely exciting. That's coming forward. We have a few trainers, principal trainers, that have gone through the Palm technology workshops. We just don't have the money to buy the Palms. And I don't know if we need those taking pictures too, along with the cell phones either, so. But I view technology as simply a tool. They're a wonderful tool. If you can use the technology to follow your priorities that you have set in curriculum, then it's an appropriate technology to go with. If you purchase technology just for the sake of purchasing it, why waste the money? It's going to be out of date in 18 months anyway. So I think it's very exciting with technology.
Well, following up your last point then, how do you know if your technology's been effective? I mean, what ways do you evaluate your technology and as its use as a tool?
In its use as a tool?
Yeah.
I would say, on the examples I just gave you were all the ones that we're assessing as being extremely valuable simply because we're using them all the time. Our rotation of classroom labs, for instance, our classroom labs are being used quite a bit, but we're finding out that they're remaining more and more empty now that we have the rolling labs on the wireless networks that are running through our buildings. So an assessment that we're looking at, and it's not very scientific, is that perhaps classroom labs are heading out into the past, especially when we can just have the wireless within the buildings and move the machines that way. We do have a problem with bandwidth, though, when that occurs.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Michael.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm still writing.
Know the feeling.
Dr. Pratt, athletics and co-curricular activities are very important to our community. Please share with us your philosophy and priorities of both.
I'm thinking hard on this because I don't want to be a hypocrite. I've already said how student achievement is number one, and then turn around and say, but so is athletics, and so are co-curricular. I've given this a lot of thought. It's a dilemma, but it's not a dilemma. Sure, we exist for academics. We really do. That's the main reason that we're here. But at the same time, when we talk about citizenship, when we talk about a democratic nation, when we talk about the arts and music and art, those are the things that separate anarchy from civilization. And without them, we're, in my opinion, we're a bunch of robots. So obviously, they are extremely important. Do they sometimes take a hit when it comes to budget cuts? I've heard they have, but never in a school district I've worked in. I've seen athletics go to pay to participate. I've seen booster clubs come forward to take care of that, but I've never seen art, music, the foreign languages, or anything go, and I have not worked in rich school districts. We've worked in school districts that have been adequate and worked in school districts in Montana. We never had any money, but no one touched the arts and sciences or the foreign languages. And because of that and because of my experience, I don't have any background that would think of ever touching those items.
Thank you. Dr. Pratt, share with us your experiences in working with special needs students.
I remember when the law went through, is that dating me? The first IEP I ever sat in?
Join the rest of us.
I think there was 25 of us at that first meeting. You were there. I've always been involved with special education. I had the great opportunity when I was a principal at Havre Middle School. We were far, and there's a whole lot of nothing in Montana, and Havre was a large area. So our school district was the largest in the area, and my building housed virtually all of the, not county, but several counties, small states of the severely handicapped, anywhere from emotionally impaired to students with extreme medical needs. The town itself was the site for many, many group homes, and which fed our buildings. And so I had a lot of experience in that area. The same when I came to Michigan. Most special education departments are strapped for people and time. I've probably chaired at least 100 IEPs myself. I can tell you I'm an advocate, a major advocate. I have 3 sons, and my youngest is a special needs child, and that opened my eyes in public ed, going through it myself as a parent. And because of that, I think that we have a lot of variables that we can work with within a school day and a school program for students with special needs. And I believe I'm known for that if you check me out. You can see.
Have you ever developed or been involved in developing an alternative method to deliver services to meet the needs of special ed students?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. Other than, again, I've had the good and unique experience to be in districts that are progressive, so I cannot ever remember being a principal in a building or teaching in a building where students weren't included, or in either full inclusion or non-full inclusion. And don't get me wrong on that. I mean, there are times when full inclusion is not appropriate and is not the least restrictive environment, so. But in being involved with a unique or brand-new program in its development, I don't believe I have been.
Thank you.
Dr. Pratt, have you ever been involved in a situation in which your knowledge of student needs and your knowledge of the capabilities of the district led to sort of a unique and highly beneficial action for the student?
No, you got to help me with that.
Okay. Have you ever been in a situation in which you know what the student's needs are,
Okay.
and you also know what the district capabilities are, and knowing those two things, were you able to come up with some creative action that took care of the student's needs?
Yes, now I understand.
Okay.
As an elementary principal at Lincoln McKinley Elementary School, again, this is back in Montana, this is a building that was about 94% free and reduced lunch, large minority population, basically Native American students. And it was a school building that had a reputation for low achievement. And when I began there, it also was a school building that seemed to be the last one to be fixed. A statement that hit me the first day when I walked in as principal is that one of the playgrounds had been transformed to a parking lot, which was a huge sign to me. Cars are more important than kids in this building. We also had bars on the windows. It was in a town, it doesn't sound like Montana-ish, does it? But it was all the way around, and of course, that was, the reason was to keep the balls from going through the window. Well, we can replace a window, so we got rid of those bars. Anyway, there was an attitude and a perception, not an attitude, there was a perception that the school was only going to be as good as it could possibly be, and really nothing more was going to help it. And there was a full need, an example being that we could not get parent volunteers. Well, we could get parent volunteers. Parent volunteers painted hallways. Parent volunteers met twice a week to come in and help with the programming. Parent volunteers started going to board meetings. We were able to garner resources to fix the playgrounds and to change the outside and plant the flowers. So there was a real need right there, but the need simply wasn't being advertised. Now we come back to assessment again. This was a building that had the lowest test scores for probably 7 or 8 years. At the end of the second year, same kids, same teachers, same parents. They were the highest scoring group, the highest number of parent volunteers, the largest student activity fund, which is principal's love. And it's a source of great pride for me and also the people that were there.
Sure. Thank you.
Sort of along the same line, but Dr. Pratt, can you give us some examples of how you have impacted the knowledge, the skills, the practices, the habits of your employees in your district or in your unit? What have you done to basically help them grow?
I would refer back to the early literacy grant and the early literacy piece that I talked to earlier in Howell. That was, I think, one example. I would, can you say that again?
Yeah, your knowledge.
Mhm.
How have your knowledge, your skills, have they impacted the growth, basically, of the employees that surround you,
Mhm.
as far as their skills, their practices that you actually administer to them? How did you help them grow?
Okay, I'd like to switch that, and this might be a unique answer, and I don't know if I've mentioned it yet or not, but I supervise 17 building administrators right now. I write their evaluations, and these are the building principals and assistant principals in our buildings. I'm also responsible for the evaluations of the 450-plus teachers that we have. So I think as an administrator group, that's how I'd like to answer it. I schedule the bi-monthly principal meetings that central office administrators attend. But the knowledge that I think I brought to Howell was, and I'm not speaking out of turn, they would know that, I felt that the principal group was fractured. There were the elementary group, there was the middle school group that nobody wanted to be with, and then the high school group. And so we had 3 groups. We had 3 different agendas. We had 3 different goals instead of all working towards one area. It was even, my predecessor would even hold secondary meetings in one day and then the elementary meetings the next. Those items were combined, and we became involved in not only becoming a cohesive group and a group that we wanted to work with in regard to teaching them some of the basic premises of organizational behaviors and organizational development. We actually turned our meetings into learning sessions. But then we've also moved forward to say that as a group, we're going to set priorities for hiring. As a group, we're going to set priorities for finance. I think the background that I brought from LIR, or Labor and Industrial Relations, what I learned at MSU and also my past experiences have brought that administrative building team together. And I think, I'd like to think that I impacted their effectiveness there.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
It's a very good segue to my question, Dr. Pratt.
I'm doing okay here.
Exactly. On the team building with the principals
Mhm.
from the separate buildings, how would you go about promoting the team building concept with yourself and the board?
Since I've never done it, I can
Purely
only,
hypothetical.
no, it's not. It's, you're going to hear me talking a lot about Chuck Briner. Yes, he is my hero, but this is the superintendent I'm working for right now. When I watch him, this cohesiveness or the closeness that he works with the board, again, it would be something I'd like to copy. The meticulous notes that he sends out on a weekly basis, not only do they go to the board, they go to every central office administrator. There's nothing that's hidden or kept apart from anyone. We're invited to meet with the board for all work sessions or pre-board meetings. Again, the leadership team is brought in. So the cohesiveness between the superintendent and the board by itself, leaving the rest of us out, what I observe from the outside is how he calls them. He sends them all of this information. They're constant visitors into the office to see Chuck or to stop and say hello to us as they go through. The amount of written materials that are provided, the many different opportunities, whether it's meeting with 3 board members and separate committees that are done, whether it's during the day, nighttime, weekends. He's phenomenal. And
The flow of information is just very much towards building it.
we sometimes kid him that we get too much information, if there is such a thing. He has been known to give us 100, or 100, his record is 102 agenda point item one day for one meeting, so.
Does that beat our record?
The board wasn't involved, it was all of us.
Yeah,
It was just administrators.
Dr. Pratt, describe a situation in which you came with a proposal to your board or supervisor that you were very high on that was rejected. Describe what you did in that situation and why.
Hang on.
Take your time, sir.
This would be in Linden, and we were working in a building that was falling down around us. I have a picture of my assistant principal, which is kind of interesting. He's holding the ceiling tile up with a broom as water's coming down through in a rainstorm. And that kind of tells you what the building was like. That was also the one I had to keep getting the boiler going all the time. And we were moving for a bond issue. And I was charged with bringing together a community group in order to do educational specifications for a new building. We worked very hard. We brought 80 individuals, community members, parents, teachers, students together, held several meetings, worked with the architects, and developed what we thought an extremely well thought out educational specification plan, and brought it forward to the board through the superintendent for action. And we presented it, and then the meeting that was going to be held, we were called to say, forget it, we're not going for a bond. And what I did was nothing. What I felt was, this was awful. We'd put so much work in. We weren't even going to go for a vote, but we did nothing. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to do, other than the fact that I assured the parents in the group that they'd done a fantastic job, and it's going to go on in the files and on the records, and maybe next year.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Pratt, the superintendent is a recognized leader of any school district. As such, leading through the vision and values of the district is imperative. Have you ever been in a situation when you had to redirect the activities of others to be in accord with the organization or the district's vision and values? What did you do, and how did you do it?
Let me take you back to 10 minutes ago. I supervised 17 building administrators. And sometimes I joke with them and say, you do have a board policy book, don't you? And what the vision is. I'll tell you what I do and then give you a specific example. When it comes to my attention, I call the individual immediately, we talk about it, and then I go to their building. I never ask them to come see me. I always go to the building. Principals need to stay in their buildings. And we'll go and discuss it. I'll show exactly where, in what area that this is not following, whether it's the board goals or whether it's the vision of the district or where it's in direct violation of board policy. And usually it ends there, and it's certainly not a surprise. I would like to think that the group that we're working with right now, and it's not only with me, it can be with any of the associate superintendents that work in Howell, or even the superintendent, our principals, whenever they're not sure, they usually always call and ask the question. Now, an example, we have a new high school principal, and it was in regard to a student disciplinary matter that when it first occurred, there was a question of whether or not it would fall under the weapons law or not. And the assistants, there are 4 assistants in the high school, so as it turned out, the student had not been allowed due process, or it was messed up. And we fixed it at the end of the day and went backwards. It was a great learning experience. It was new people that were involved, but I think the way I address it is usually directly and as quickly as possible.
Oh, and back to me again. I'm getting writer's cramp. We're going to move into an area that it sounds like you're familiar with in Howell, but it has to do with buildings. Describe your experience in new construction, renovation, and building maintenance.
Can you give me the 3 choices again? Or they're not choices.
But 3 topics?
Yeah.
Your experience in new construction, renovation, and building maintenance.
Okay. I'm going to take the one in the middle first. My first experience with renovation was my first day as middle school principal in Mason. And there was no office when I walked in. School was going to start in a week. So we took a piece of drywall and put it on some filing cabinets in the hallway. And I was assured that even when it came up to Friday, that Monday morning the office would be done. So my experience with renovation is that fairies come in at the night and everything gets done. And it was done on Monday. But we went through that whole first year of working with punch lists, dealing with items that worked, didn't work, architects, especially the construction supervisors that are on site. So my renovation experience came in Mason. With new construction, I've been able to be involved with an elementary that was ground up, new construction from the ground to the top. Also, a lot of experience in running bond issues and bond elections and working with friends groups and outside groups in order to get the information out for voters. And we're going through renovations at one middle school that's been on a 3-year cycle. We're going to be finishing that up just this year. What's interesting to me is the number of meetings. Now, I'm excused for most of them. So my experience would be that our director of operations goes to a lot of meetings and renovation meetings. Now, regular building maintenance, just what 15 or 16 years of a building administrator is concerned with.
Dr. Pratt, as you know, a superintendent must be an accomplished communicator. What are your strengths in this area?
I'm a fairly good writer. My ability to speak in front of a group is either good or very bad at different times. Working with small groups, I'm a fairly good communicator. Working with specialty groups, I think one that tried my abilities the most, 3 years ago, we had moved from half-day kindergartens to all-day alternate-day kindergartens. And when you have 26 of them over 6 buildings, 25 of them, that was a very emotional topic. So I was facilitator of several parent evening meetings, getting information out and coming to a compromise, so to speak, and running the number of half-day programs that the need chose. Another area that I was involved with in regard, again, to a high level, high stress level, a topic is that I was placed in charge of redistricting our 6 elementaries to 7 elementaries when the new elementary opened, and that worked really well. We had a process. We had others that had gone through it, and I believe it was 15 evening meetings over 4 months. But we came out with a fairly good plan that needs to be redone again because everybody's moving in the wrong place.
That's how it always works. Thank you.
Dr. Pratt, can you give us an example of how you dealt with a difficult parent or parents who had a valid complaint against the district or one of your administrators, and how did you handle the situation?
I do that a lot.
Imagine.
I think in my resume you saw that I wrote down I'm the unofficial ombudsman for the district. If you call Howell and ask for the superintendent and you have a complaint, you'll get me. and it's my job to resolve those. A lot of them are revolve around discipline, and very few of those complaints are justified, because your question says where we were wrong.
Right.
And an example, this is going to sound far-fetched, and I'm not saying it for the entertainment value, but it was really a very high-profile piece. One of our elementary schools adopts a pig every 2 years and does a full school unit on Charlotte's Web, and the little pig gets bigger and bigger. And some pigs bite. The point, there were some major complaints in regard to the pig and how it was being taken care of within the building. And in it was a high emotional event too, because who doesn't like a baby pig? But I mean, it was definitely a very, it was a very legitimate complaint, and we were wrong in how we had dealt with it. What it sparked, though, was basically, what do we do for all animals in the buildings? We have chameleons, we have hamsters, we have rabbits, we have therapy dogs, we have pet cats, we have a menagerie in Livingston County. We love our animals. And so the one complaint from the parent who hadn't been treated correctly, and I agreed the parent hadn't been treated correctly. We discussed it with the principal. The principal came up with a resolution, but then it became larger, and we actually came up with a policy for animals throughout the entire district. So it was a very good thing when it finally finished.
Thank you.
W.C. Fields says it's always tough to follow an animal.
Yeah.
I haven't heard you mention yet, Dr. Pratt, anything much about developing a strategic plan.
Okay.
Could you help us in what steps you would take in the development of a district strategic plan as a superintendent?
I had the opportunity as a middle school principal in Linden, when I worked in Linden. Linden contracted with an outside contractor to develop an outside facilitator for a strategic plan for the district. They'd never done one before, and I was named as the internal facilitator. So I worked with that external facilitator through the whole process. Basically, my job, the external facilitator facilitated the groups. It was my job to contact the groups, recruit for the groups, get the meeting rooms, keep the notes, provide the minutes, develop the plan, have it written, obviously with clerical help, and then bring that forward again to the group to come to consensus on each and every piece of the plan, whether it be the overarching goal or the mission, the belief statements, working through the goals for the district, the sub-goals, and then most importantly, how those goals are going to be assessed and timelines on those assessments, and how those assessments are going to be measured, and also a timeline to revisit the strategic plan, to revise and write again. So that's been my experience with it.
Okay, so to evaluate the strategic plan, I take it that that's involved with the writing of the plan? Is that, how is it assessed, or how do you measure the progress of the strategic plan, or assess this after the strategic plan has been approved, I guess is?
Once the strategic plan has been approved?
Right, how do you assess that the district, or you as administrator of the district, has moved the strategic plan forward?
My hope is that during the writing of the strategic plan, on each and every goal and objective, I was only involved with one, so I'm
Right.
working off of one
Okay.
model. You've
Sure.
got the goal, you've got the objective, and then you have the strategies and how you're going to meet the
Right.
objective. The overarching goal, let's say the strategic plan is for 2 years or 3 years, there's your goal. Your objective 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, objective 1, I would hope would be specific enough to say that this will be accomplished on 12/5/05 with an actual date.
Right.
The strategies that are in place in order to make that objective be completed also have the timelines. In addition to the timeline, the person that's responsible. The other part of the strategic plan is, once the strategic plan is written, it doesn't go up on the shelf somewhere. The strategic planning group is also brought back on at least quarterly intervals throughout the year in order to have reports given to them on the assessments on what is being completed and what's not being completed.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think it's a worthless document.
It could become worthless if you
It
don't.
could become one, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Pratt, you had mentioned earlier one of your experiences with the bond issuance. You had to collaborate with the community to get the enthusiasm to get this bond on the docket, if you will. Do you have any other examples you'd like to cite on building community strength to achieve something?
My most recent one, and I think one I take a lot of pride in, and I'm going to speak very candidly in this point. 2 years ago, we were approached as a school district and invited by the city, also by our intermediate school district, a group called the Livingston Diversity 2000, and the school district were invited to have an initial meeting. I'm not saying anything new in that Howell does not have the most excellent reputation in regard to diversity issues. And Livingston 2000 was a group that was formed when the Ku Klux Klan was getting all of the headlines. And of course, painting an entire community with one brush that was completely unfair to do. So these groups were asking us to tackle an issue that was very sensitive, as you can imagine, and what could the school district do to help them in coming forward with at least a diversity statement or a diversity initiative. We moved from that point, and the assignment was given to me to work with a group called the National Coalition, or National Conference for Community Justice. It's out of Detroit, Michigan. And we brought them in to give diversity training to every single one of our administrators. This then was spawned off into a large program backed by grants to survey our community, survey our students, survey staff on all issues of diversity. And diversity is not defined in this project. It's just shades of black and white. We're talking rich and poor, city kid, farm kids, skater, athletes. Well, take a high school. How many groups do you have? Subgroups in there, up and down the line. The whole project lasted about 18 months, and when it was finished, we had a diversity action council that was formed and came out with a diversity statement, a very strong statement, that talked about how Howell Public Schools and the community of Howell stands for the safety of all children, whatever they bring to the table. And not only was it strong enough to state that, it went to the city to adopt it, and it went to our board to adopt it as a resolution. And everybody that was involved signed it. And it was a large step, and I think it was an outstanding step. Our board's very proud of it. Our students, our community is very proud of it. And it was amazing to see people that were involved drop out because it got to a point where you had to stand up and say what you believed in. So that would be my example in the community, that diversity resolution.
Dr. Pratt, talk about what you would do the first 100 days on the job, and at the end of 100 days, and what would you like to accomplish?
Well, I didn't expect that question.
Sounds like a
My first 100 days, I would like to meet everybody. I'd like to learn everybody's names. I'd like to find out exactly where all the buildings are and the shortest way between them. I would like to have a handle on the budget within the first 100 days. I'd like to, at that time, have established a relationship with this board that would be very candid and one that I would be asking for assistance in helping the district move forward. Concretely, I would want to know when all the games were, when the homecoming was, when the choir concerts and the first band, or the parade's going to be. So it sounds very, very minimal. I'm not doing well on this at all. There's an awful lot. The names are very important to me. The names are very important to me, and what everyone does and how they're doing. I'd definitely like to have had meetings with every bargaining unit, leadership group within the first 100 days. I would be, I think, on a very good working relationship within the first 100 days with the building administrators and also in the buildings. It's pretty hard. We have 450 teachers. I don't know all their names. I'm pretty close to it, but I'm fairly sure in a district this size that I don't see any reason why I wouldn't know who everybody is. Custodial, maintenance.
You've had a lot of rich experiences, and this last question allows you to use some of them in a more general way. What would you consider you have done to make your current district more effective? In any way you want to describe it.
More. I have, it's hard doing these things because it sounds like you're bragging on yourself all the time. This is difficult. I'm gonna preface my answer with a part of my background. As a building principal, I did not like state and federal programs. There was too much paperwork for too little money, and it was difficult. 2 weeks after I received 2 weeks on the job in Howell as Director of Elementary Curriculum and Instruction, I was informed that I was also the Director of State and Federal Programs. So I'd spent a whole career as a principal trying not to know anything about these programs, but now I was in charge. So I spent that whole year playing catch-up, working with Department of Ed, MDE Field Services, and I learned a lot. And I believe that through my work, we've maximized all of our title programs, especially our at-risk programs. There was a lot of waste in our at-risk areas with no focus toward what the programs were supposed to be focused toward. But between the grants, the federal and the state programs, I think we are much more effective since when I came 3 years ago. Right now, that LAP grant has run out, the one I talked about on the early literacy, but we did not drop our programs. We actually expanded it, and they are being funded all through grant monies that we've been able to work with and through in order to fund that piece. So strangely, I've grown to like it.
Good. Okay, now, that's the end of our questions. And so you get to take a big sigh of relief. And now we get to ask you, you can take some time to think about this, but we ask you can make a final statement about who you are and what your qualifications are and what about this and your interest in this position to us. And then you can have the opportunity to ask us any questions that may be on your mind about Hazlitt and the board.
Okay. Well, I've been, I think I know Hazlitt fairly well, especially with my time in Mason, and people I know in the community, and people I've worked with the district. But a question that I'd like to ask the board, that finances aside, what do you see as your biggest major initiative coming through? But you can't use finances as an answer.
Well, here we go again. We have a new superintendent to hire. We just hired a new finance director, and just approved it before you got here. We have an older board, as we're a little long of tooth, as you might see, or some of us are. And there's going to be some changes on this board, so a new superintendent will have to deal with that. Charlie, to my right, is in his last month, and there's going to be some other changes in the near future on the board for a variety of reasons. So those are going to be some issues for a new superintendent. We've taken finance off the table, so obviously 90% of our conversation has been of all school districts, I think, or a higher percentage than that of all school districts. That's the major issue. Fortunately, we have better, sorry, microphone, I forgot about that. I didn't think I was going to be speaking again. Our finances are in better shape than most, certainly with some of the districts that surround us. But that's going to be a major issue for us. It's just the new faces. So I think that's pretty much what, I mean, it doesn't sound like much, I guess. Perhaps it doesn't sound like much, but
Seems
I'm glad
like a
we
lot
don't
to
have more.
us.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
glad I don't have any major issues that I know of anyway, and I've been around the longest on this board as far as that are hidden in the closet on any new superintendent. I don't know of any. We're very proud of our district, and I think rightfully so. And I think that's why we have people like you applying to get into this district. But I know of no major ones. I mean, that's the honest answer that I have is the changes that you're going to see and that we're going through right now. That's been our challenge.
Well, after I asked that, I guess it would be scary you are getting a new superintendent.
I mean, we have other things going on. Not to steal anybody else's thunder, but we just signed an agreement with Michigan State for a whole new early child education and build the facilities, and it's going to be co-run. Some of the people who designed it, but I mean, that's a big initiative for us. We'll be way out in front of other districts, and so we're taking opportunities, even at a time where fiscal constraint might seem appropriate, but looking for opportunities to continue to excel in this district. So that's one, that's going to be on the drawing boards over the next 2 years, is implementing that big program. And
Completion of our bond issue. I mean,
Yeah.
we have bond issue. We're in the midst of a bond issue completion. Hence some of the questions you heard regarding renovation and that sort of thing. We're a district that's passed several bond issues over the last 15 years, and we seem to be always going from one, just finishing up one, and going to the next, and I certainly don't mean to be forecasting another one, but by any stretch of the imagination, but that'll be an issue, because we're in the middle of one right now, and so.
We also have to say that we are experiencing declining enrollment.
Declining, yeah. We have
For
classes
the
that are
first time in a
larger.
long time, really in the last few years is when it started.
We have larger classes that are graduating than we have entering, and so therefore, just by the nature of the lack of birth, we have that situation. School of choice has helped. I'd like to think we're rather picky on school of choice. We don't open our doors, we don't advertise, we don't say we want. We're going for school of choice as a catch-all. We don't do that, and we sort of pride ourselves on that. I mean, we do have smaller classes now, so we do have availability to take school of choice, and we do that very selectively. And in my view, we'd want to continue to do that. But yeah, declining enrollment is somewhat of an issue, not a major issue, but it's somewhat of, we keep our eye on it.
One of the reasons, as it was mentioned prior, was the fact that this community is well-respected and a great place to grow up and raise your families. And as was mentioned previously, once the children have grown up and gone on to other parts of their lives, the parents tend to stay in the community. So affordable housing is a challenge for some.
Guys like you and me.
So we really have
Yeah.
kind of a two-edged sword. It's a wonderful community to live in, but demographically, we have some attrition.
Okay.
We're sort of landlocked. There's really not much more land for housing developments. And so that probably won't probably won't get too much more brand-new housing. Other issues are staff, administrators who are, nearing the end of their careers. We've had, in recent years, a number of people who have retired, and we've had to replace with new teachers. We've been very successful at that. But I think that trend will continue. Another 10 years, the faces I see out here probably won't be here. So that's a challenge for any superintendent, is to maintain the quality staff that we currently enjoy.
We also have 1 year left on our collective bargaining agreement with our various segments, which we'll come up with for renewal after next year. So that's another challenge in the future for us, that our history has been very successful in amiable solutions on both sides.
That's our history. We're an open book.
Okay. Other questions? Any statements you'd like to make?
One really short statement, and that is that my hope tonight is, at least through my answers, that that you were able to just get a good look at me. I feel pretty good at how I answered. I don't know as I would add anything to any of my answers, so I think you saw what makes me up. And that's all. I'm done.
Great.
Well, Dr. Pratt, we really want to appreciate you for your interest in the superintendent position and visiting with us tonight. We are in the process of interviewing, so we have several more interviews to go. And as soon as we finish that process, we'll contact you about the outcome and where we're going to go from there.
I appreciate being asked. I really do. I was very pleased to hear that I made the first cut, so
Thank you.
it felt really good, really.
Thank you.
Thank you.